Hello, my name is Mario Richards, and I'm a graduating senior. I'm an English major, and this presentation will be about my internship this spring as a teaching assistant at both Springfield Technical Community College and Westfield State University. So, as the intro stated, my internship was a bit of an emotional roller coaster with many highs and a few lows. It all started in the fall when I got an invitation from a professor at Springfield Tech Community College to help her as a teaching assistant, and I emailed Professor Lang to set up an internship for the spring. It ended different, however, and although my internship started at Springfield Technical Community College, it ended at Westfield State because something came up and the professor I was working with had to cancel the semester. So due to this, I emailed Professor Lang and tried to figure out what the alternatives were that I could use instead. I sent an email to my advisor, Professor Deanna, explaining the situation, and I asked if I could serve as a last-minute teaching assistant for her class since the semester had already began. Thankfully, Professor Deanna was open to the idea, and then the rest went from there. I also emailed her about 4 weeks into the semester, so it was relatively late, but we still got it done. After getting approved to work with Professor Deanna, I began reading the novel her class was currently on, and I immediately learned that my note-taking pattern had to change. I had to take more detailed notes and anticipate students' questions and responses. And due to this, I realized how much time a professor spends preparing their notes for class. I also spent some time doing things like responding to students over Blackboard and sending reminders for them to add stuff to discussion notes in case they were missing components of the assignment. This was also a consistent theme in my slideshow, as I really enjoyed interacting with students, as you'll see later on. I also got the chance to do a few icebreakers before class, and this made me alleviate any nerves that I would have had going into each class. I also realized that it's a good tactic to get students relaxed as well. Due to this, I usually do fun ones, like asking which coffee is superior between Dunkin's and Starbucks, or questions like those. Another thing I wanted to add about icebreakers is that it taught me the importance of setting the mood for the classroom. And in the future, my goal is to become a professional. And I've learned the importance of trying to facilitate and create a supportive and engaging classroom for students to excel. I got to work on lesson planning as well, and I even got to try out my own class activities, which was really fun. Professor Deanna allowed me the flexibility to be creative, so most of my lesson plans were directed in ways that engage with interdisciplinarity, since it was an introduction class, and many students were from different majors. I initially hated the virtual world that we had to deal with as students, but I eventually realized from my internship that it has many benefits, and one of them was being able to private message Professor Deanna during class to ask clarifying questions or to seek suggestions. Overall, being able to communicate this way made my job more informative and made it an experience where I could learn on the fly. I also had the opportunity to meet with students outside of class, and this was one of my favorite things to do. It made me feel like I had office hours, but more importantly, I was able to experience the one-on-one mentoring a professor and student shares when discussing class assignments or anything really. And I did a few of these during the semester, and for each one, I learned something new. So, speaking of assignments, one project that I was able to work on was helping students prepare for their final project. I used my experience from Professor Starr's class, where she made us go through a very engaging and beneficial process of peer review work called project pitching, and that was adapted from Professor Savini. I emailed Professor Starr to ask for the documents that she used in class for project pitching, and she sent me them and I adapted them to the needs of the class. After this, I shared the idea with Professor Deanna, and she gave me the green light, and I began the process of explaining the project pitch guidelines to the class. Professor Deanna and I used this workshop to create a project pitch as a base to get students talking about their final projects and getting initial ideas from their peers. I felt this was necessary and a great tool for learning because, if done well, students would get an array of in-depth feedback on their potential projects, and they would also get feedback from myself and Professor Tiana. So to ease students into the pitch process, Professor Deanna and I spent some time doing sample pitches that we created and had students play the Believe or Doubter game, another lesson plan I borrowed from Professor Starr, where students would share the strengths and weaknesses of the presented project. So whatever student was presenting their project. The project pitch was successful, and soon we had students workshopping their ideas in breakout rooms and large group sessions. And the image here shows students suggesting ideas for a student that was presenting their project. This moment was surreal for me, as I was able to see the fruition of using my classroom experiences and what I learned from my professors in my other classes to help other students. And the feedback is more towards the end of that image. So a quote that I'm taking away is, and although it seems generic, it means a lot to me because I could see a change in the quality of work being produced at the end of the semester. The quote is, "It's finally that time of the semester." And it made a lot of sense because students were burned out, and this made me realize that in the future, I have to get creative and find ways to keep students motivated despite the burnout phase, just like Professor Deanna did. And then the experience I got from all of this overall is I feel very confident in my goals of becoming an educator. I also feel prepared and ready to deal with any challenges that might come up. And I know this is my passion, but I didn't have any doubt before. But I know this is the right choice, and this internship solidified my aspirations and my beliefs. So at the end, I was able to do a poll with Professor Deanna, and I got some results on how the students thought I did. There were a few questions on there, but what stood out to me the most was when students chose what lesson I did that contributed to most of their learning, and it was my very first lesson, which was surprising for me, but it makes me very happy because I was very nervous for my first lesson. So the other things on this Excel sheet shows what their feedback were for different things that I did in class. And then finally, to end my project, I would just like to use the very generic quote, "When life gives you lemon." So I usually say when that happens, try to find a scientific way to make orange juice. And although I'm joking, what I mean by that is being able to adapt to circumstances despite what they might start out as. So for me, I made the best out of my situation, even though I was dealt a different hand. And I feel like this is important for new interns to consider, as things might not always go as how they planned for their internship. Thank you very much.